Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. Your doctoral advisor is key to making the most of your PhD education. This little talk is going to show how to find a well-suited advisor, an excellent advisor, and how to make the most of the relationship. 16 separate steps. First, as a preliminary step, I recommend picking your research focus up front. Dabbling when you're already in your PhD program elongates your schooling's length. It also militates against you becoming an expert at something, which is key to employability. And dabbling renders you vulnerable to picking a specialty based on an unimportant factor, some single course or professor you liked, a specialty that would get you out a little faster, or so on. In choosing a research focus, you do have a tentative decision to make. Do you want to assume greater risk of unemployability by focusing on a basic science, theoretical something, or something other that's something also that's low practicality? Or do you want to choose something practical and fundable? For example, in psychology, a theoretical basic science focus could be the optogenetics of cognition. In future decades, that could prove a key building block for improving lives. But unless you're at a Caltech, Princeton, MIT, or so forth, and so on and so forth, you're working alongside one of that field's eminence, your chances of making a living at that are small. Your employment prospects are greater if you focus on translating basic research into practical approaches to a common mental illness, such as autism, depression, or Alzheimer's, even if full cures probably won't exist until more basic science is understood. 2. Because of the oversupply of PhDs, it really helps if you can attend a prestigious university, or at least one that in your field attracts some serious research funding. Even if your background isn't stellar, the following approach can often gain you admission into a program that you wouldn't have thought would admit you. Do, however, consider limiting your choices to universities in locales in which you wouldn't mind living, not only in graduate school but after. That's because the connections you make in graduate school are more likely to be at that university or local to that area. 3. Within that tranche of universities, identify maybe a half dozen professors whose research you might enjoy working on. That's crucial because you're going to get much more attention and career launching help if you're helping with their research. Unless you have specific professors in mind, a way to find on-target ones is to visit the departmental website of those universities and sift through the professors' bios, including, of course, the description of their research interests. 4. Study an article on their research whose title seems interesting. Their webpage usually includes a curriculum vitae, usually it's abbreviated as CV, which is also a fancy term for resume, that lists their publications. If there's no link to your chosen article, a Google search will usually get you at least the abstract, and a university library card of any sort will usually get you the whole article. Take notes on the article, especially what I call a must remember or two, and an intelligent question about the article that you're going to want to ask that professor. 5. Write a thoughtful email to the professor in which you explain that in searching for appropriate doctoral programs to apply to, you found him or her and were intrigued by their research, that you read article X, was struck by, and then you insert one or two of your must remembers, and that you were curious about, now you can insert the question that you came up with. End your email by saying something like, I'm wondering if we might speak, perhaps during your office hour, to see if it's wise for me to apply to your program and perhaps become your advisee and or research assistant. If your undergraduate or work history would be impressive, of course, include a paragraph on that. 6. Today, unfortunately, the usual response to an unsolicited query is no response. But if your letter is strong, you'll probably get one or two professors willing to speak with you. When you do get a meeting, after thanking the professor for willingness to speak with you, wait a moment for the professor to take control of the conversation. That's often best. But if he or she doesn't, you might start with, would you mind telling me a little more about your research that's on the website? Most professors love talking about their research. Later in the conversation, you might briefly, like 1 minute, describe the highlights of your background that might make you a worthy advisee or a research assistant for that professor, and ask if she thinks there might be a fit there. If you're lucky, the professor will encourage you to apply to the doctoral program there and even offer to write a letter of support. Many professors love having capable and sycophantic research assistants. 7. Yes, a professor is assessing you during that conversation, but you also should be assessing them as a potential advisor. Would you guess that he or she would be a good mentor for you? And if you did your part, would he or she champion you in getting your PhD expeditiously and go the extra mile to help you launch your career? Do you sense that working on their research project is of enough interest to you? Ideally, enough interest that you'd want your own research and dissertation to springboard off of your professors. For any professors that remain of interest, say so at the end of your conversation and in your thank you note, which, by the way, you should write even to professors you've decided are not well enough suited. Now let's turn to getting in. Number 8. You'll probably want to apply to more programs than just those where you and an advisor click. That's because even with a professor's encouragement and even a letter of support, it's no guarantee of admission, let alone of a felicitous financial aid arrangement. For example, one institution might make you pay full freight, while another might give you a traineeship, which is a 4-year free ride plus a stipend. And you can't necessarily judge by the institution's prestige. I personally was rejected from the University of Colorado's PhD program, yet I got a 4-year traineeship, including stipend, at UC Berkeley's. Number 9. In your application essay, if you've had a positive interaction with a professor at the institution, of course, mention it. But in any event, the letter should make clear that you're applying there because the program is a good fit to your academic and career interests. Again, do remember that a PhD is a degree that trains researchers. Consistent with the truth, focus on your research interests rather than any desire to be a practitioner. If practicing is what you do, consider getting a practical doctorate or master's, such as in psychology, like a PsyD, or in education, an EDD, or in business administration, a DBA, and so on. Now let's turn to making the most of your advisor. Number 10. Let's assume you've been admitted. Before even registering for your first term's classes, try to meet with your advisor, ideally in person. Start by asking for guidance in mapping out your course plan, perhaps for the entire program, as well as discussing the role you might play as that professor's research assistant. The ideal, of course, is getting to do substantive work of interest to you that is also central to the professor's research. 11. Commit to making your courses, your papers, your doctoral exams, and your dissertation all be related. You'll both finish your PhD more quickly and you would develop that deep expertise that you need to be considered a fundable expert in your field. I, like many doctoral students, made the mistake of trying to learn a little bit about a lot of things. My dabbling mitigated against my becoming an expert at anything and elongated the time it took to finish my PhD. Remember that doctoral training is just that, training, and the papers and projects are mere practice exercises. It's usually wise to resist dabbling and make as much of your work as possible to be synergistic with each other. 12. Meet regularly with your advisor to discuss your progress and to address your academic, career, and even perhaps personal needs and questions. And as always, look for opportunities to be of help to the professor. 13. Consider requesting an independent study with the professor instead of taking some standard elective. That allows you to have a one-on-one course with your advisor and future champion on a topic that is central to your research and core to the professor's expertise. 14. Yes, focus on preparing for a research career. But if you might like to be hired as a professor, you'll need to be at least decent at teaching. To that end, you might offer to be a teaching assistant or even teach a course, usually an undergraduate course. While many professors, especially research-oriented ones, are not great teachers, most universities have what's called a faculty development center, which offers training in teaching as well as confidential observations of your teaching. 15. When it comes time to pick your dissertation topic, it may be time to swing for the fences, something that would make your target employers salivate to hire you. While picking something manageable, pick something that could be foundational to a potential breakthrough in the field. Of course, it's expedient if your dissertation builds on your advisor's research. That would help ensure you get your advisor's time, support, maybe money to conduct your research, and even co-authorship with that professor to publish in a quality journal and maybe present at a conference, all of which are career boosters. And finally, number 16. In the months before you complete your PhD, it's of course time to focus on landing a professorship, a postdoctoral fellowship, or a job in the private sector, nonprofit sector, or government sector. Now, all your years of foundation building with your advisor will hopefully pay off. Ideally, he or she would tout you to appropriate heavy hitters, and that can mean more than all the resume pripping, cover letter polishing, and perfunctory letters of recommendation put together. In conclusion, it's sad but true that in most fields there are more PhDs than there are good PhD level jobs to go around. But this little talk's advice on making the most of an advisor and on completing your PhD expeditiously but impactfully should increase the odds of your obtaining what I consider a dream job, helping to move an important field forward while also wisely teaching the next generation. I do thank you for watching. We welcome your thumbs up and, if necessary, thumbs down, your comments, your sharing on social media, and your subscribing. But in any event, I do appreciate you watching. I am Marty Demko.